insight conversation as part of the ATL Education Expo in 2021. And really excited here to talk with Tiffany Leach, one of the founding 6th grade ELA teachers at KIPP Academy. Tiffany, thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Of course. Good afternoon.
So I really want to start by just digging into your backstory, like what led you into education in the first place, and where did you start out when you first started teaching?
Awesome. Well, thank you for that question. It is quite the journey. So I was an English major in college. I went to Howard University undergrad and always have had a love of writing and communications and sort of leading and serving. My passion has always been children and families. And I actually initially wanted to be a lawyer, and I was. So after undergrad, I went to law school at the University of Georgia in Athens.
Yeah,
And throughout law school, my focus, after the traditional first year, my focus when I was able to choose electives were a lot of public interest type areas of the law, as
sure.
well as like family law, children in the law, and education in the law. So for me, school is really just the foundation and the ladder to wherever you want to climb. And so I wanted to kind of merge my passion of just, I enjoyed school growing up. I think the person I am today was shaped by teachers and community leaders that I interacted with growing up. And so I went on to practice juvenile law at the Children's Law Center in Washington, D.C. when I graduated law school. And then I relocated because I am a Georgia native. I'm from Augusta, Georgia. So I relocated back to Georgia in the metro Atlanta area. And I actually went into practice for myself. And a part of my private practice was family and child advocacy law. I did a lot of work in juvenile courts in DeKalb County. Representing families whose children were in the child welfare system, also practiced in family court with some custody, guardianship type cases.
Yeah,
And what I was noticing over the years, especially in my child welfare cases, which involved Department of Family and Children's Services, there was major inequity in terms of the educational services and just wraparound services in general that children needed, especially if the home life was not stable. The school was kind of like that glue. However, for children that may not have that stability, I was noticing one of the cases that stood out the most to me before I transitioned to actually teaching myself. I had a client that I had been representing since he was about in middle school. And at this point, I served as his child advocate attorney. So minor children have attorneys that advocate for their best interest. He was graduating high school and had no transcript, no school record, had never consistently attended any one school because of the home environment changing. Caseworkers not able to really service his needs.
yeah,
And the only thing I could think of is this scholar is going to age out of the child welfare system.
right.
There's no school record. There's nothing to say, this is what he's done. This is what, can he get a GED? I remember we were looking for like GED programs, Job Corps, like what can he do now? Because that major piece that shapes all of our lives, right, had been missing for years and had been so unstable. So that got me more interested in taking out the litigation part of practicing law, and I was more interested in the policy. Like, how is this even possible
Right.
that you can just be floating? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, where does this happen?
Right.
And so I honestly believe that if you're going to impact and influence any policy in any area, you should know what it feels like to be on the ground.
Yeah.
And that was my starting point. And I joined Teach for America. And I'm a 2016 alum. And my placement school was Westlake High School in Fulton County. And I taught there from my time in the Corps and after. And this is my first year transitioning to a new founding school, KIPP Academy, because of the the values and just the mission of KIPP Soul and what we stand for and believe in spoke to my desire to continue to pursue educational equity and really address these concerns. And so we are a school that is really built on courage, conviction, love, community, and really incorporating like building an anti-racist school, but helping especially Black and Brown kids see their identity, appreciate their identity, and give them a choice-filled life. So it just really aligns with my mission and what I would like to be true for all schools and for all scholars. So that's how I got here. And then, you know, way back when I majored in English, so I am an English teacher. I want to be on the ground, but I want to be in the ground, you know, in an area that I am, you know, familiar with and that I enjoy. And I really also think with English language arts, the communication piece and everything that you need to do, no matter what industry you go in, you're going to need to know how to write, how to read, how to communicate. So that's where I am now.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot there. So I'm going to dig into each piece as we go through this, but
okay,
sharing that. And I also just say, I actually went into teaching for the exact same reason you did. And almost verbatim, I would say to people, it's like, well, if I want to be in policy, I should know what it's like on the ground in the issue area that I want to work. And so I 100% resonate with that feeling. Now, you obviously took sort of some might say a backwards route into it, right? Like I was literally just talking to another attorney who did teaching first, but always wanted to go to law school. And so, you know, I would love to hear a little bit more about the child welfare and advocacy experiences you had. What were some of the trends or like just like common problems that you kept seeing arise when you were doing that work?
Yes, of course. And I get that a lot. And that is definitely true. I've kind of went the reverse. And I've talked to educators and attorneys alike. And I think each route is beneficial, right? So if you're practicing education law now, it's good that you were a teacher before. And if you are advocating and trying to impact policy, it's good that you kind of understand the laws that are current and that you know what it's like in the classroom. What I would most often see is children that were in need of accommodations, but did not have the proper supports to have those evaluations and those accommodations like kind of followed through with. And it wasn't always just education, like learning. Yeah. It was sometimes other services that without those services, they weren't able to like really function in the school environment. Gotcha. So if you had experienced trauma and have not been through any sort of treatment or therapy, then it's gonna manifest in a certain way in the school setting. Right. There is no true, again, in child welfare, a lot of times you are dealing with children that are maybe in foster care or group home living. Yeah. So there's no true record or family history sometimes to really allow a counselor and a therapist to have some sort of blueprint on what this child needs, right? Yeah. And so it manifests at school like, you know, maybe they're just a behavior problem or they don't want to do their work or that sort of thing, when really there's a whole lot more. In schools, in a lot of communities and at-risk communities where there are not those kind of services available in the school, they're just not equipped to handle. And so the outcome becomes a child who begins not coming to school. Right. Or cutting school. Right. Or without a guardian to bring them to school or to ensure that they're, you know, doing school. And so that was just a problem for me. I remember because we would have review cases quite often. If a child is in care, then commonly the state kind of acts like as parents, right? Yeah. And so the judge would review, like, how is it going? What have you done? You know, Child and Family Services. And to no fault of their own, case managers would be like, well, we're trying to get the transcript and get them enrolled. And it may have been weeks, right? But because they're in a new placement, they're not enrolled in this new school, or placement has changed and we know that stability and continuity is good. So you're like, okay, this scholar should stay at their home school, even though they live in this district now. So
Right.
then the issue became transportation. Well, how are they going to get to their old school, right? Foster parents like, well, I'm not responsible. Like I live in Clayton County. I'm not driving to DeKalb County for them to get to school each day. So what happens? No school. So those were the things I saw most. It's just the inability to maintain a consistent like school attendance and record and receive the wraparound services that were needed. So
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah,
saw
that makes
most
a lot of
often.
sense. And I mean, even, children in foster care or working with DFACs and all that kind of stuff, like I feel like it's a population of folks that we don't even talk about at this point. We're so focused on sort of the bigger, like, all right, lower socioeconomic groups versus more affluent neighborhoods. We don't even like there's kids who are experiencing so many other things that we're just not able to address, right? And I think one of the things we're learning to appreciate, it sounds like, is how much being able to navigate these systems is so critical to success. A lot of times we talk about in when it comes to like going to college, right? Like, does a student have the wherewithal and support to navigate the SATs and the applications and the FAFSA but basic stuff like this where they might need an advocate or all kinds of circumstances. It's wild. I'm curious, having seen that stuff and gotten an interest in policy, what what was the turning point to say, you know what, I want to head into the classroom? And now you've been in the classroom for, it sounds like, several years now. So do you have why you mentioned before, it's like, I want on the ground experience. But when we're thinking about those child welfare issues compared to in the classroom, like, draw that line for me. Where do those connect in your mind?
Yeah, good question. And yeah, it's been 5 years, going on 5 years now. Um, and for me, we could reach so one by one, like a case. If I have a case, that is one scholar, like one child that I know about.
Right.
Um, in the school, you have a building of scholars, and you see, especially the pandemic. With the pandemic, we have a lot of inequities have been brought to light, and there is going to be a lot of work that'll need to be done after this all clears in terms of scholars and their education. So the link for me is, how do some of the policies that currently exist really benefit kids? How do they really benefit kids? In terms of, where are the life skills? Where is the social emotional learning? Where is that emphasis over things such as maybe standardized testing, right? Do
Right.
we need a baseline test? Do we need to check for understanding? Do we need to master certain skills by the end of certain grades? Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Does it need to be the guiding star of all we do in education?
Right.
No. Do schools need to be graded based on how a scholar on one day performs on one test? No. Like, that is not advocating for the whole child
Yeah.
and their future. The point of school is to get children ready to be adults in society, right? Productive citizens of society. So we need life skills training. We need vocational training. We need social and emotional learning. How do I express myself?
Right.
Right? There's so many other things that need to be addressed and need to be a focus. So for me, I have a better lens now that I have classrooms of kids versus,
Right.
this case and, going through the system. Okay, this case is closed. Next case, going through the system. Now I see with my own eyes what's missing and what the focus should be. And to the extent that I can incorporate what I can, in my classroom culture and supplement the curriculum that we use with what I know kids will benefit from in life, to me, that's impactful. And prayerfully, they pass it down. They have younger siblings. They can show, they can lead, and it becomes like a domino effect.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned like the whole child, and I feel like that's whole child learning is something that's getting thrown around a little bit more often now. But as someone who's had experience actually in child welfare advocacy and those services, you probably know more about what that actually means than most of us. And to your point, I'd love to hear how KIPP Soul does this with you guys, but a lot of folks, now you're in a school, you've got a classroom of peers, you've got a community to leverage now to support the whole child more than you had, like you said before, where it's just you trying to work with the one student. How do you guys try to, approach creating that wider support, whole child approach at KIPP Soul? How do you guys focus on that? Or in your classroom, what are some of the things you try?
Yeah, one of the great sort of things that is a part of our culture is we definitely believe in um, restorative practices, even when it's not something that needs to be like a problem that needs to be solved, but just practices in terms of building family and community. So something that we do each week, and of course, it may even be more often when we're back to like a really normal schedule. But part of our homeroom each week is we have circles. We have circles that are created, and sort of all teachers lead the circles, but it depends on like kind of the focus, and it's always linked to one of our values. And it gets students talking, like you have a talking piece you share in the circle around things that like our values, like conviction, around, even with the pandemic, having courage, like talking about your feelings. And not to say that a scholar may pour out their heart, but just knowing there's a space and that they're heard.
Yeah.
Kids come to school a lot of times, you just come learn this and then that's it. It's never just like, how do you feel? What do you think? What would you do in this situation? Just giving them voice. And then in those moments, a lot of times you get insight into, what they're thinking or how they're feeling or what additional support they may need. Like if nothing more than a cloud check, and making sure that it's more than just academics, that they feel valued, they feel heard, they feel loved, they feel supported. So we do that through something called like our class family circles, our soul circles. We also celebrate scholars and offer a lot of extended learning programs. When you talk about the whole child, there's really more than just the core content, right? We know we're going to get math, science, social studies, English, but what about that child that wants to code? Or what about that child that really loves to draw or really loves to dance? So even in this virtual environment and even going forward, when you talk about the whole child, tap into something. The example I gave you earlier of my client, my former client who had no transcript and no like record of school, before his life truly disrupted, he was an avid like soccer player. And I heard you say, you coach soccer, and that was his outlet.
Right.
So like if nothing else, when things were a little unstable, his grandmother had gotten to a point where she couldn't really care for him full time. But when he used to live with his grandmother, he played soccer at Decatur High School near her home. And so, a weekend visit to his grandmother's where he could play on the soccer field with old friends was enough to kind of settle all of the other things, So just kind of knowing that about students, like what else can we offer that even though I struggle in math, I'm really good at writing plays, or I'm really good at dancing or acting, and just letting a child know that they are a whole person, and it's not, this one test score, this one grade point average, just this one content that you have to, master. And we just see them as kind of like a roster, right? We see you as people, people we love and care about. And we want to see your future. We want to see your future be bright. And so I would definitely say our circles and our extended learning offerings. And we have a lot of community partners that come in and run a lot of the extended learning too. So it's not just, kind of, because of course teachers have more than enough on their plate, right? So like I know we have a community partner doing offering karate classes right now. We have a business club, and for now we just kind of run them like based on a quarter. So there'll be like a group of extended learning programs quarter by quarter. One of our assistant principals is even running like a journaling expressions club. Again, a way to voice that social emotional, like talking, writing, being in touch with oneself. So all of those are just some examples on how you really, how you cater and acknowledge and value the whole child. They're more than just a name on your roster and a test score on your data points.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because, I grew up in a wealthy suburb of Philadelphia, and I went to a really good public school system. And a lot of the things that you're describing, after school, activities, extensions, communities that I was a part of, like that was all kind of baked in because we had the means to access those things. And that is definitely where I certainly developed a lot of myself and my personality and my confidence. And it's interesting that now when you look at schools in less advantaged areas, you guys are trying to put all of these things together for a whole child experience, whereas other places they're just sort of taken for granted, right? It's like you go to like the super affluent suburb in Buckhead, and every parent wants their kid to be in 18 different clubs because they're preparing for college transcripts. But what they're actually also doing is providing so many outlets for self-expression, self-discovery, development, routines, community. And I feel like it's something we're not saying, but it's clear that it's necessary because all of these students on one side of town are doing it. But now on the other side of town, you guys as a school are forced to try to do it yourselves and kind of play that role for everybody. I'm curious if you feel like that kind of stuff, like these extra opportunities to explore different interests and be a part of different groups, like should more of that be baked into what school actually is instead of this endless focus on assessment driven stuff?
Yes, I think that would be a great sort of pivot, right? Keeping the core of school, of course, but those offerings or pathways. I know some high schools do have like pathway programs for scholars, but starting out early, that early exposure, it's so valuable. And what happens is it transitions into core content, right? I'm taking my ELA test, and there's a passage about robotics. I have some prior knowledge now, right? I can make a connection. It's not foreign to me because I was exposed.
Yeah.
So those community and extended experiences relate. I'm reading my math word problem, and they're talking about they went hiking on this trail, but I've never seen a trail. And what is hiking? So being able to get kids exposed beyond, especially when we talk about urban cities and, here in Atlanta, if you haven't been outside of the perimeter at all, and now you've been on lockdown and quarantine this last year, even stifling, like where were the field trips for the last year, right? The little bit that schools are able to do have been, halted for now. And then as you mentioned, there is a big difference between affluent communities and more lower socioeconomic communities, where even if your school isn't doing it, if you're in an affluent community, affluent family, then you have a community that's doing it, or your parents are going to, take you there, or, put you in this program, and all of that shapes your learning. Your experiences definitely shape your learning. And I can only imagine the struggle it must be to be reading and learning about concepts and experiences that you have no relationship to, right? You're in science, but you've never seen a lab. Your school has no lab. You've never done an experiment. It's hard to put it together. So yes, it would be wonderful if there were funding to incorporate, again, more than just the core content, but those classes that give students the chance to be hands-on and to learn by doing and to create and to be like project-based.
Yeah, I feel like we overcomplicate this a lot. I think there's two things at play. One is a lot of folks who, obviously public education is not short of detractors. People on all sides of the spectrum come at public education, but part of it is just like a lot of folks, especially folks who grew up in a setting like mine, usually don't even realize like there's a huge difference between experience, right? Like your education, depending on where you live, can be vastly different. And the second point is like to what we're describing. It's like kids need experiences, period, right? They need experiences. They need to meet people. They need to try stuff. They need to be able to speak and talk and explore their own thoughts, because that's just how well-rounded people develop. But to your point, like I feel like we sometimes we get so far in our heads, like from like a state standpoint or a district standpoint, it's like we got to hit these benchmarks. It's like we're forgetting why we're actually here.
Right.
You know, like I don't remember what my grade was in sixth grade math. It doesn't matter.
Right.
I did sixth grade math. But what was matters is that I came away with skills that I could use and ultimately develop confidence in using them. Right. I feel like, you know, we need more of that kind of just like, let's take a step back and be humans for a second. What does it take to be a good human in our society? And let's make sure kids have that. So what led to your, you know, you were at Westlake, which is, you know, a traditional public high school here in Atlanta. And you decided to step away from there and go into a founding team of a brand new school. You know, what led to that choice, and what's that been like being a part of a founding team?
It has been exciting. It is so exciting. It's an experience. I mean, when you go to school, you never think about, I wonder what it's like to found a school.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
how do
absolutely.
you create your own school? So that was something that kind of resonated for me when I was exploring next steps um, with my career. I felt like I had reached a point where, kind of like you, when you mentioned, okay, I wanted to be on the ground so I can then influence. I didn't feel like I was doing the influence. I was kind of getting the day to day, like just getting my teacher duties done, but I didn't feel a part of an impact.
Yeah,
And it was again with the pandemic, right? I was considering a like public policy fellowship and had gone through the process and things of that nature. And placement in Metro Atlanta was no longer like available, or if there were, um, I guess, sites, maybe they were like, well, we don't know what it's going to look like because we're not in the office right now. So there were a lot of different things going on there, like through Lee, which I'm sure you're familiar, Leadership for Education Equity. But at the same time, KIPP Soul was founding, and a lot of the values and what they stood for, the mission of the school, mirrored what I see as equity. And it's a city-wide charter, so it's all over Atlanta. You know, our students are from, and you can all different, kind of like all different backgrounds in terms of communities, right? So it's not just the community around our building. It's, you know, widespread in the city. So I felt like that was impactful, and just building from the ground up with like-minded individuals. Um, who know what education can be and know what children need, and want to see all of the child, not just a CCRPI like data point, um, was, you know, exciting to me and motivated me, because I'm like, we're going to leave a legacy. We're building a school, and this school will be the role model for what it's like to, you know, have a community and a village that's supporting everything that a child needs, right? Because with that exposure and love, you build that love of learning. So you're going to get your data, you're going to get that curiosity, that inquisitiveness, that desire to like figure out this math problem, that desire to analyze the text, that desire to do that science project, because you're not just harping on, you know, kind
yeah,
of the rudiment,
yeah,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
here's the, right,
That's the thing.
here's the
I mean, I
curriculum
tell people all
plan,
the
do
time.
this.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
where I grew up, it was a top high school in Pennsylvania. I couldn't tell you the graduation rate because it was a byproduct, right? Like the success, the base
right.
was a byproduct of the rigor and community and experiences. And I think because of this like culture of accountability and compliance, and testing, I used to be someone who didn't really like buy into like, oh, testing's killing everything. Now I really do buy into that, because once you put that there and saying, we're going to judge you by your test scores. And that's not the only thing schools get judged by, but it's certainly the biggest part.
It
And
seems to be overarching.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like what people
And yeah, I agree. And I welcome all schools of thought. That's why I love, education, law, policy, advocacy, because there are good arguments on all sides of it.
Sure.
It comes down to whose interests are being put first, right? If we truly have kids at the forefront, right? We truly care about outcomes for kids, all of the rest is going to come. All of the rest is going to come. And so, yeah, you want to see like how students are performing, what needs to be increased, what is mastered, that sort of thing. I do get, but with you, my concern is leading with that and putting that pressure on a scholar. I like to tell scholars, hey, you're going to show what you know. Not like, hey, we got a big test. Y'all get ready. We got this big test.
Right.
I think that's too much. That's unnecessary. Yeah. We've been learning, we've been growing all semester. Now, come on, show me what you know.
Right.
Get excited to show you what you know. And it's just how you frame it. Mm-hmm. Right. It's how you frame it.
So no, this is great. I wanted to ask sort of our capstone question we're asking everybody, and you have a very unique set of experiences, so I'm anxious to hear what your thoughts are. When you think about the future of education, what do you think education should look like by the year 2050? So we're about 30 years out. I'm trying to be a good educator and backwards plan here. So, it can be broad strokes. It can be not like any specific idea. You don't have to give me the whole system. But, when you think that far in advance, what do you really hope that, or you think that education should look like by that point in time?
Well, I'm going to do broad, but let's just a few key points, right? What we currently sort of need to strive towards. There needs to be adequate funding, right? As we have seen in this pandemic, schools are the heart. Even in affluent communities, they were missing school. Schools are the heart of our everyday lives, right? It is where our children practically live and grow and learn. And so there needs to be definitely a funding priority in all states to fund schools to be safe environments and to be creative and innovative. So we said 2050. So we got the latest technology. All right. We never forget our foundation. So we have the core classes, but we have offerings where students can choose career pathways starting in middle school. Why wait to high school to kind of know, right? Get the experience now. Elementary schools, more foundational, of course, but still there's a sense of community. There is building through doing. I think project-based learning should be a focal point. Get kids learning project management skills. There should be a community aspect where they are coming up with something that they can do to strengthen their school community outside of the school building, because we know it's thriving communities where schools survive. Right. Schools that we see right now struggling, there's hardly any community members. They've been driven out for different various reasons. So we need to build strong communities and teach scholars to have pride in their community and want to be in their community, right? Once you grow and you've graduated and you're going to start your own company, bring it back to where you grew up, right? Contribute to your community. So definitely all of the extended learning that we talked about, those options, latest technology in classrooms. We see now districts can find a way to give kids laptops, right? So whatever we're using in 2050, we're taking them home. You don't need a pandemic to be able to have technology. Right. You can learn, the traditional way, but have that technology to supplement, because by then I'm sure everything will be digital. So definitely access to all of the digital platforms necessary for scholars to grow. And then not the emphasis, there should be some mastery of skills, yes, but not the emphasis of, standardized testing being the end all be all. but
Right.
what can this scholar do now? What choices do they have when it's time to graduate? What
Yeah.
can they build? What can they create?
Right.
What college can they go to? What certificate can they earn? I mean, there should be some certificate programs in high school. You should graduate with some skill or ability to go out and work
Yeah.
if that's what you choose to do. It's all about choices, right? So we continue to have college prep as well, but just building students who can leave K through 12 and have a means to an end. What are they going to do now to create their own choice-filled life? And so that's what I think. So funding and innovation and technology definitely need to be at the forefront in all schools, all communities, equal funding. So we might need to revisit the, schools are funded by property taxes
Yeah.
situation.
Hopefully we'll figure out a way.
Yeah, if we're gonna do that, then we're gonna supplement to reach a certain
Yeah.
equal.
Right. Yeah. What I love
Mhm.
about what you said. I mean, I think the funding and technology, it's those are just critical foundational elements that have to be improved by the time we get to 2050. But the theme I draw from what you said and the rest of it is really like, one, we need to look at kids in a very positive way. It's like they all have opportunities, and so when they graduate or when they're approaching graduation or even approaching the next grade level, we have to look at them in a positive orientation, right? Like, what's this student capable of next, as opposed to, oh well, they failed their test, so we just we need to get them passing so we can get them out of here. And the second thing I think you mentioned, this idea of choices, and some people start talking more and more about this idea of agency. Like, our students, they have opportunities, and then do they have the wherewithal and the ability to make those decisions on their own or with their families? And I love that. I think that's absolutely something that resonates with me, and it would be amazing to see it more institutionalized, this idea of like, we need to get students to the places where they can make their own decisions and have decisions to make, right? Like, pathways available in a way that treats them like an asset to the community as they are. So I love all that. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Again, this is Tiffany Leach, one of the founding sixth grade ELA teachers from KIPP Soul Academy, also a former attorney and a public school teacher here in Atlanta. We really thank you for your time today and sharing your perspective. It's been really awesome to have you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I enjoyed the conversation again.
Awesome. Thanks so much.